All right, welcome back. We are going to cover environment variables, flavors, different environments, basically, and a way to easily toggle between them. In a real-world application, you're going to probably have a local environment like we have right now, but you might have a staging environment, even hopefully a production environment if you ever get to market. And it's nice to be able to, not have to go through your code and change like the URL to your API. Being able to do this in one easy click. That's what we're getting into today. And as a quick reminder, I have a YouTube membership program. Come join. It's great. It's affordable. And we have a Discord, and you get access to the source code and all the great things. And in the case that you really want to join and you just can't afford it, just send me an email. It's on YouTube, my email address, and state your case, and I will, potentially get you access to these things and onto our Discord. So the reason I bring up the Discord is this topic, among other things we've gone through, has been actually stuff suggested from my Discord community of things that they want to see covered. And I'm trying to get to all of them and trying to sort of prioritize the things that people are asking for. So there's another perk there. Come and ask, and I'll make a video for you. So we're going to, talk about flavors. I mean, there's lots of words for it. But let's get this started up. So we're going to use a package called .env. Which we want to specifically look for the Flutter version or the Dart version. It's not really Flutter specific, I don't think. It will work in Dart as well. And what this allows us to do is we can create like a this sort of like file that has different parameters in it. It works much like if you're doing a Python project. There's a very common sort of thing. And it will allow us to sort of set these in these files. Something that you probably you shouldn't version control. You can, because really there's nothing. This is a bit different than like a server-side environment. Like anything in your Flutter app, whether it's environment variable, whether it's encrypted or whatever, like it is accessible. If anything on the client is completely accessible by someone who knows what they're doing. So don't feel like, oh, I'm putting this in this environment variable. Oh, it's secure. Like we're not trying to make it secure. You can't. There is no friggin' way in the world to make your client side have anything secret in it. That's just not possible. The only exception is, of course, like encrypting it, but your app won't be able to decrypt it without the encryption key also being part of the app. So unless you're trying to do something where like it's secret unless you're like an admin who has a post-it that has the code on it, like which that doesn't really have any real use cases for. You cannot keep these things secret. So we're not trying to do that. And that's where, like in a previous video, we put our Google Places API key on our server so that we're not exposing it. It's server, you can keep stuff secret if you're, know what you're doing. Client, never. There's my rant. Over. Let's get to it. Okay, so we're going to install this package. So we'll just do in the Flutter project, Flutter pub Flutter pub add flutter.env. So we're going to start with that, which is really nice. And then we're going to go into, and we're actually going to make I think a new feature for this. We'll put it inside core, but we're actually going to make a folder called config. And in here, we're going to have something called env.dart. Okay, so we'll have that. And then inside I think in our root directory of our Flutter project, that's usually a pretty common place to put these things. Let's actually, let's put this in our, do we have an assets folder yet? Do we not even have we don't even have an assets folder yet. That's crazy. So we're gonna make an assets folder. I can't believe we don't have an assets folder. We are so far into this project. We haven't got to doing any design, so it kind of makes sense. So we're gonna make an assets folder. Inside that, we're gonna make a folder called env. And the reason I'm putting it here is for web, this is actually the file. These environment files need to be able to be served, and we do want to make this available as a web application. So we're gonna put in assets env, and then we're gonna make a new file in here called dev env. You can call it whatever you want, but we'll call it that. And this is something you could choose to not version control. And the reason you might want to do that would really just be for workflow purposes. Like I said in my long rant, there's not really a reason, these aren't going to be secure anyways. They can't be. But if you're working with another person, you might want to have a different, environment than them in terms of your dev, like your local host, maybe you're running on a different port, that kind of stuff. So you might choose to git ignore this, in which case you can go into your git ignore and you can, put something like assets/env/dev env. You could do the whole folder if you wanted to. The caveat is if you don't, you clone to a new machine, you have to remake these things basically. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to keep it. You know what? Actually, sorry, I'm going to actually do the dev env one. And I'll make sure, I'll try to remember in the YouTube description to actually put a copy of this for people who are in the community who can who have access to the source code, so they can easily grab like a version of it. But I think I'm going to not version control it because just make it easier for people collaborating on this in the future. So we'll have that there. That's great. And then in here, let's just make a let's do something that's real. We'll have our API base URL. Oh, I'm in the wrong file. API base URL, and let's just look at our I think it's in our client. Let's kind of step through this client provider. Yeah, right here. So we're just going to use essentially this, and there we go. We've saved this in here. Okay, so now we have that file, we've installed our package, we're good. Now we're going to create this thing. I'm going to call it env.dart. And again, this is inside here. One thing we must remember to do is in our pubspec.yaml, because we have our assets folder now, we're going to look for where they have assets. Here it is. I'm just going to uncomment this. And here we're going to have assets/env with a trailing slash so that it allows all these things to be part of it. When you do make these kinds of changes, we do have to do a full rebuild of the iOS app. In which case I'm going to just get that going in the background now so that we're not waiting. But let's keep moving here. So first thing, we're going to import that package, our flutter.env package. Then what I like to do is make something, and we're going to make an enum, essentially, called flavor. You could call this environment, state, you could call it like version, I don't know, but we're going to do flavor. And we're going to have a develop environment. We're going to have a staging environment, and we'll, actually, let's just go with develop and production for now. And we could add more in the future as we see fit. Then what we're going to do is actually have a value underscore env equals flavor, and we're just going to set what we want this to be, and we'll just use develop for now. And this is basically the idea is like we would go when we want to build to a new thing, we could go into this file and just change this in this one spot, and all of our environment settings, will carry through. And as a bonus, I'm not making this a final because we're actually going to do something to allow us to override this with another environment variable when we do the build or the run commands. So stay tuned for that. It'll be cool. So we're going to make a class called env. It's going to have a static init function, async, and what we want to do is have a nullable string called env. Actually, we'll come back to that. That's the little bonus feature at the end. So let's have a switch on our env, because based on this, we want to do different things. And here, we're going to add missing cases here. Develop, I don't know why it doesn't add all of them. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So in the case that, yes, well, we do want to have, a late string called env path. A late final string called env path. And when it's developed, basically what we're going to do is we're going to return or set it to assets/env/develop env, which is just dev via. Let's rename this. I like the word develop more. And then in the case that it is production, we will basically do a production env. So let's also make that file. I am going to version control this one because, in theory, your production environment should always be the same between if you're working with multiple people, but we'll just make sure we have the same stuff in there. And maybe for this, it's actually like https://mysite.com, api.mysite.com, trailing slash. Okay, so now we have those two different things, and we should be good there. We'll break, obviously. And then, you would go through and add all these kinds of things here, and now we have our env path, being set. And then at the very bottom, after the switch case, we're going to go await, and we're going to take our .env package, which we imported here, so .env.load, and we want to load based on a file name of our env path. And there we go. Now we've loaded that into memory, and everything is good. So now, how do we work with this? So let's just do a test right now. I'm just going to do static, dynamic. This code will be gone in a bit. We'll just make it a getter, and we'll do we'll just call it like, actually we'll call it like get value, not as a getter. And basically what we can do is we can go .env .environment, or sorry, env, and then we actually pass in a value. So let's do like API key as an example, or not API key, but API, what did we call it? API base URL. And let's just, test this thing out. So I'm going to go to our, let's do the main.dart, and we can just kind of do it in our run function. So we can actually get access to env, just go like this. And we do want, let's actually do this a little bit properly. We're going to go into our bootstrap, and we're going to make sure that we await our env dot init. So that just initializes and gets everything going. We want that to happen. And in fact, I'm going to do that first because we might at some point, our auth provider might require environment variables. So we're just going to do that right off the top of our Bootstrap app. But basically what we can do now is we can do env.getValue, which is just this random function we made. And let's just make a v equals this. And let's just go print the v and just print some like things like this just to kind of see it in action. We'll go to our debug console and refresh, and let's see if we actually get stuff. There we go. Not initialized error. I wonder why. Oh, wait. This, yeah. So we can't do it here. We need it to be initialized first. So really, as long as like the booting is finished. Again, this is just test code to see how this works. File not found error. Okay. So did we do something wrong? Assets /env /develop env develop, it looks like it's the right word. File not found. So it's trying to find our thing based on this. Assets env. Let's look at our pub spec again, make sure we included this correctly. Assets /env. Yeah, that looks like it should work. Did I build? Oh, you know what? This was called dev env, and then we changed it, and I didn't rebuild. That's okay. I need to rebuild anyways because we added the prod one. So, well, whatever. Let's let that build. All right, we are back, and you'll see in our console that it printed that out, and that was just us printing this sort of thing. So that's cool, but how do we really want to work with this? So what I like to do is, we could, of course, just maybe we like did something where we pass in a key, and then we basically go, hey, here's this key. This would work. Let's go here, and if we actually put in, API base URL, I believe we should get that back, right? And that's fine. But now it's another, like issue that I bring up all the time, copy and paste errors, like wanting to change it one spot, missing it, all that kind of stuff. So what I like to do is instead, we're going to have something that returns a string. And it's going to be a getter, so we'll just use the word get here. And what we can call this is just API base URL in the more Dart syntax way. We're not going to require a key. And instead, we're going to return API base URL. So now we just have this string in one spot. We don't need this in the getter. Now we are having an issue here because this is a string. So there's two things we could do. We could decide to return a nullable string because that's what this could be. If you forgot to put this value, null is going to come back. Or we can just fall back to something. And that's usually what I like to do. Just fall back to an existing thing. So let's actually just grab this. And, if you forgot to put this in, we'll just go back to localhost or, your production environment or whatever you wanted. So just a nice fallback there. And everything is good. So now we will just do env.api base URL. And this is no longer a function, even though it really is. It's a getter. It's hiding the parameter part. Still kind of a function, just a getter. But now we should have the same thing, right? We're getting this back. Wicked. Now, if we change this to production right here and rebuild, we actually see api.mysite.com. So that's really handy. So let's actually get rid of this stuff here and get rid of this, because where do we really need this? Well, it's in our client provider. So our client provider here, we would just use env dot, we need to import it, dot API base URL. Done. We're done. And Something is wrong. Connection refused. Oh, because we changed it to prod. Let's put it back to develop. Duh. We don't really own that domain. Well, we can see it's working, when I change that one thing. So that's great. And you can obviously do this for as many things you want. And what's really cool is it's not just for strings, right? Although technically you're always going to be like storing strings in here. Let's just do a test one. Test key, for instance. I'll do this in develop. Test value, sure. And let's just make it like 7, okay? And we're designing this, so let's make a static int get, and we'll just call it like test value. And here we can actually go and return this test value. But again, it's a string. Everything coming out from .env is going to, it's going to be a string, nullable string. So what we can do is we can take it and basically parse it into an int. So we can go int.parse. Oops, we got rid of something I didn't mean to. So we can go int.parse and do that. But this could be null. So really, let's just put like a default value in here. And we're actually going to do a default value of a 0 as a string because we need to parse it, and we'll get 0 back. So let's test this out, and we'll go back to our main.dart, and I will re-put this in, and we'll do our test value, and let's just see if we get this back as expected. So we actually see 0 coming back. This time we saw 7 because it actually reread the file when I reran it. Now here's a problem. Int.parse is not really a safe thing to do. In fact, you should probably never use int.parse on anything that can be dynamic data. And in fact, I don't even know when you should use int.parse because when you're having a string, what if the string had a word in it? So what I like to do is always use try-parse. And try-parse is basically the same as parse, except it returns if for some reason the parsing goes wrong. We're fine. It will just become null. So in this case, at the very end, we'll revert back to 0 as the integer. So it's basically going to try and do this. If not do this, it's going to try and parse it. And if for some reason there is a value that isn't actually a parsable number, we fall back to this. And that's just how you can handle ints. Another way, and you could use int.parse, is if you have it in a try-catch, right? We could have done something like this, where we try to do it, if not return something. But I think this is a bit cleaner. Just we try parse and then fall back to this 0. So let's test that out by going to our env, develop env here, and let's just change this to a different number, 2. And what's cool is we don't have to rebuild. Like we have to do a green arrow rebuild. We don't have to fully rebuild. It will still pull these things. When we add a new file, though, that's when we had to do the rebuild there. Okay, so we have a test value. We're getting 2 back. So let's actually put in, like fa-da-da-da-da, which obviously will, make the try parse not work. And we'll just get back 0, exactly as we expected. It fell back here. And let's actually just omit this key altogether. And in this case, we still got 0 because it didn't find the key. It was null, and it fell back to this, but then it still parsed it. So there you go. Wicked. So we'll just do that. Test value. Awesome. Rebuild. Make sure we're still good. We got our 2. We are good. So we can do that with ints. We can do that with doubles. You could do it with dates. You can store a date in a way that you're going to store it and just parse the date time. So it's a lot better than just working with, nullable strings throughout our code. So yeah, that's about it on that topic. The last thing I want to touch on is, okay, and I've made this mistake before. I've used this pattern and I've deployed, a web app to product. Luckily, it was a web app, so it's easy to change on the fly. I deployed it to the production environment, but I had develop set here. That's, a problem. So what we're actually going to do is foolproof that. This is kind of a nice way to do this. So what we're going to do in our init function is we're going to get a constant value called env override. That's just what I'm calling it. Is there one R? No, that looks right to me. And what we can do is we can do string dot from environment, and let's just do env in caps. So you'll see this, it's a const. How's that possible? Well, anything when we're doing string from environment, it's actually a compile time constant. It's not when the app runs, it's not a runtime constant, and it's not like a final value. It's a constant. At the build time, at the compile time, this will be set. And you'll see it's a string. It's not even a nullable string, and the way string from environment works, if we don't have that environment variable set using Dart define, it'll just be an empty string. So what we now are going to do is we're going to check if environment override dot is not empty, meaning something's been set there. We're going to kind of check through some different things here. So we can do a switch on environment override. We can have a case. So let's imagine we put develop. And just to even future-proof this more, we can go dot to uppercase or, oh wait, why can't I do that? The dot dot. Okay. Let's just do it here then. Two lower. Yeah, why wasn't that going to go forward? Two uppercase. So we're just going to do, actually, let's do two lowercase. So we're just going to check on the two lowercase version of it. That way, in case we pass it in with uppercase letters, it'll still, be this. If we pass it in lowercase letters, it'll still be the same. If it was like passed in like this, it'll still work because we're just going to convert it. So in the case it's develop, what we can do is we can actually override our env path not our env path, but our env itself. So this value right here, which we did not make a final, we can actually just say, hey, you're going to be this. Doesn't matter what we set here, we're going to be this. Then we'll break out of this, and then we'll also do a case for production. I'll just do env equals flavor dot production. So there we go. Now, how do we actually work with this? Well, basically, when we're doing a build or when we're doing a just like a run, we can pass in, Dart define sort of values to make, these things go. So just to give you an idea of how you could do this in like your command line, and let's actually, maybe we'll put this in our make file for future use. So let's just have something like build, we'll just do one for build web develop, right? And here what we want to do is you'd want to run like our Flutter build web, -- release. That's what we normally do. We want to build web, but what we can pass is actually Dart define equals, and then env equals, and then the word develop or, production, whatever you want to do. And now this value, env equals develop, is basically something that our env string from environment will be able to pick up, see the word develop, be like, okay, I don't care what's here anymore. I'm overriding that. I am taking charge. I got this. So that's kind of like one way to, to do it. From a development point of view, this is what I like to do. We're going to go to our launch.json. So inside here, run and debug, you'll see, okay, we have no configurations right now, but we can click the settings button, and we'll just choose Dart and Flutter. And we get sort of these default ones, and this just allows us to go between, normally building in profile mode and release mode, just based on what you have set down here. So that's cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the first one. We'll call it Open Mic Flutter, and maybe just in brackets we'll do develop, lowercase. Doesn't really matter what we call it. And in here, we're going to put some lovely stuff. So we can actually pass in a variable called args. And what we want to do, this is where you could do things like, -d Chrome to say to run in Chrome. But what we want to do is actually -- Dart define. And then the second part, just like we did over there, will be env equals develop. And now let's copy this again, and let's use prod. Production. And same thing here, we'll just change it to production. And that is, if we look at our env, yeah, it's looking for the word production. I'm just going to copy and paste, make sure we did that right. Okay, great. So now we have those two things there. I'm going to stop my Mac app. I'm going to change this to production in our code, and we've already proved that that will make us use our like whatever mysite.com thing. I'm going to go here and I'm going to change it to Open Mic Flutter develop. Make sure I have my simulator still clicked, and click play. So now I've just switched to this different flavor, and once it builds, we're just going to test. If this doesn't work, it means basically like if our app doesn't work, we did something wrong, but we should be overriding it to develop because we're passing our Dart define env equals develop. And now when you're like, doing your continuous integration testing or deploying or building for the app stores or whatever, you just make sure you have a build command that is going to pass this in, and no matter what this is set to, it'll, override it. And that's saved my ass a lot of times because I just don't have to think about that anymore. Oh, did I change environment to the right thing? It's just like, no, I have a make file, I run a command, and it passes this through. So you'll see, yeah, we are getting stuff back. Everything's working. And if we did the other one, it would, essentially break because it would be pointing to our production server, which is not up and running yet, and it will be at a later date. Okay, so I'm just gonna get rid of some code that we don't really need anymore. So I got rid of that, and now we're gonna have our thing in our main. And yeah, that's it. So yeah, just as a quick review on that, basically we have this lovely env thing here. We initialize it by getting a value here to allow the override. And then based on whatever it is, whether it was set here or overridden here, we load a particular file from our assets. Yeah, then here we just load it. And we're going to have different getters here. We have one for API base URL. You can have one for your, I don't know, there's tons of environment things that are going to be different between your environments. So it's a great place to do it. I'd say most of the Flutter projects I'm working on, I use the same pattern. It works great. And I probably have a dozen different things for that change between an environment. Sometimes it's even like, do you want to enable, you use it for feature flagging and stuff, right? Like maybe you have a feature that you don't want to roll out to everyone, but you want to roll it out in your test flight build. You can just enable it there. Lots of power, lots of values, and super handy to use. Let me know if you have any suggestions on how we could do this better. I will note that this could be done as a Serverpod provider. We could do the same kind of thing and actually get it. However, I just don't see a need for it. There's no state here. This is accessible at any time in your app, whether it's just in pure Dart code or in your Flutter widgets. So to me, it's like making it just like a class with sort of like some static stuff, works totally fine. And, but if you disagree, let me know in the comments, and we could, of course, convert it. It's just one of the things that's like, why do we need to worry about getting access to ref if, we don't really need it? This is just a class we can use anywhere. It's very basic. All right, thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.